outbreaks in Ireland. These women from this group are not doctors, they're not professionals. We have scientists, we have doctors.
Parents.
But doesn't give them the right.
No, but their parents were worried about their children. Their parents.
That's fine. I support them in that, in getting the help for their children. But like I said, correlation isn't always causation. It would be like me saying, oh, I was in a car crash, okay? I got hurt. I was wearing my seatbelt. Now I'm going to campaign not to have seatbelts anymore. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Of course, and David Grimes has made that point. He calls it the blue jumper argument many times. Yes. But you believe, though, that the conference should not be
I think it's a risk to public health. And the Imperial Hotel, I've spoken to them several times. I really think they need to be responsible about who rents their rooms. And having Gemma or Doherty go in there and frighten the people of Cork, which will result in parents not vaccinating their daughters, is dangerous and irresponsible. Sorry.
Right. No, you're okay, Fiona. I wanted to give you the opportunity to make that point. And I guess, and thank you, Fiona, parents are parents, and a worried parent is a worried parent, and a worried parent will grip or grasp anything that they can to try to explain what it is wrong with their child. And Fiona is factually wrong in terms of this program. I've never spoken to anybody who is worried about their daughter's health following a HPV vaccination who told anybody else not to vaccinate their children. And you're not going to do it either, Peter, are you? Good morning.
Good morning. Absolutely not, PJ. I would never do anything like that. The reason why we're in this situation, and it's not only us that believes this, but it's our daughter's doctors, is because Rebecca, up to that point, was fully vaccinated, which included the HPV vaccine. So, I mean, I'm never going to argue against vaccines because they are one of the step changes in civilization over the last 200 years. So what we're simply saying is this. Here is a vaccine where a bunch of girls are suffering from a number of side effects or a number of symptoms that are listed on the manufacturer's own documents. Doesn't that need some kind of investigation? That's all we're saying. And what we're getting instead is denial. So, I mean, there's nothing happening here. You know the famous scene where the guy's in front of an exploding factory and he says there's nothing to see here. This is what we're seeing at the moment. And in terms of the science, yes, I mean, there's lots of studies that claim that the vaccine is safe, lots of them. And the vast majority of them are sponsored by Merck or GSK, who are the manufacturers of the vaccine. When you start looking at the real data, when you start looking at the adverse events that are reported in Ireland and across Europe and across the world, then you start to see the real story.
What happened to Rebecca?
Well, what happened to her was a gradual, well, not so gradual, decline in her health over a number of years. She was injected with the vaccine. The first injection was when she was 13. And immediately she started suffering some kind of allergic reaction. Now, we didn't link it to the vaccine because we hadn't had any information on that. And so, the weekend after, I think we were off down to the chemist to buy some antihistamines, thinking that she had a recurrence of an allergy that she had before the vaccine. And so, basically her health declined over a number of years, and we ended up going from specialist to specialist to specialist, and they all said, we don't know what's wrong with her, let's try this. And then my wife made the connection and came into my office one day, and she said, here's a list of symptoms Rebecca wrote down. Here's the product information leaflet for this vaccine. Have a look. And that's when the connection was made. I mean, what would you do if you had aspirin and you started suffering some of the symptoms listed on the PIL that you get with every box of aspirin? What would you think?
Yeah. One point that is made by, I wish he was here to make it, David Robert Grimes, but by others,
So do I. I wish he was there to make it as well.
Spoken to doctors about this, is that the symptoms, like the joint pain, like the excessive tiredness, like the weakness, the many symptoms that have been outlined over the years, those symptoms existed, Peter, in young women before there was ever a HPV vaccine. It's only that now that we have a HPV vaccine, we've found something that we might be able to link it to, but science argues otherwise because the symptoms existed prior to the vaccine?
Yeah, you're talking about the CFS diagnosis that's made without actually having seen any of the girls. CFS, as far as I'm aware, started back with yuppie flu back in the 1980s, which was due to high-pressure jobs and a certain amount of abuse of white powders. As we go on, CFS was also attributed, if you remember, Gulf War syndrome, which was itself was attributed to a vaccine. So as we go on, this CFS diagnosis comes over again and again and again. The problem we have here is one of the major symptoms that all the girls share in Ireland is not on the CFS spectrum. And, you know, we've not been standing still. We've gone to doctors. We've had really specific and accredited blood tests done abroad that have come back with a specific diagnosis. Now, you'll understand I'm not going to reveal my daughter's medical history on live radio.
Sure.
But we have a specific diagnosis that all the doctors currently treating my daughter say that the vaccine would at least trigger this because of its effect on the immune system.
Not speaking about your daughter personally, but can you generalize what is that diagnosis if more than one person's coming back with it?
No, there's an infectious disease specialist in Dublin, one of the leading specialists in Ireland, has said that what can happen is that vaccine can trigger a dormant infection within the body. Now, if that infection is allowed to grow and propagate without any recourse to antibiotics or whatever, then it becomes chronic. It starts infecting all the bones, the bone tissues. The tissues between the bones.
Yes. And I have spoken to people before who
starts infecting the brain.
Something that a person from Regret asked me before was, or asked on this program before, while again, as with your good self, not saying anyone should not vaccine their children, was that they wanted all of the young women who report symptoms to be researched as a collective. Is that what you want for your daughter?
Yeah, that's the investigation that's been called for. What I would like, I mean, as somebody who's an engineer, what I would like is to find out if there is a common element amongst these girls that makes them prone to react. If that's true, then you can test for it or check for it before the vaccination is given, thus making the vaccination program safer.
Do you accept that for millions of people around the world that the vaccine has worked? And do you accept, for example, particularly in Australia, that cervical cancer linked to HPV has almost been eliminated?
But that's not true. I'm sorry to disagree with you on this, but if you look at the government's own figures in Australia, the number of people suffering from cervical cancer has unfortunately increased in the last few years.
You'll notice I specified.
I know you specified.
Cervical cancer linked to HPV, because we know that not all forms of it are.
Absolutely. But I mean, the same is true in
But no, Peter, it's important that I reiterate the question.
Okay, but this is
the types linked to the HPV in Australia have been
I
virtually
totally understand, but this is amongst the vaccination population. It is amongst the age groups that have been vaccinated in that country. There is an increase.
But it's not HPV linked.
I don't know that. I have not seen any studies that say that or say something else. I have not seen anything. That information is not available in the Australian government website.
Okay, so you'll be speaking at the event tomorrow night.
I will not. It'll be my wife.
Your wife. Okay, Peter. Well, look, how is Rebecca these days? How old is she?
She's now 18. The reason you're speaking to me and not both myself and my wife is that she's off to one of her routine medical appointments, which kind of gives you an idea. What can I say? Her quality of life is terrible. She does have good days, and her good days are better than they used to be. And she has less bad days than before, and the bad days aren't as bad as they used to be. So, I mean, if you like, it's, you pour a cup of water into a swimming pool, in theory it gets deeper. It's that kind of slow progress.
Okay.
So, I mean...
But again, to reiterate, just before I finish with you, and I wish her and you the best, you're not saying to anybody, don't vaccinate your children.
Absolutely not. What we're saying is, and what we're asking for, is an investigation that will end up making the vaccination program safer and reducing the number of girls suffering side effects that are listed in the Merck data. And the Merck data also says that 2.5% of people receiving that vaccine will have a serious adverse effect. I haven't made that up. I have read that from Merck's own data.
Okay. All right then, Peter, thank you very much for that. David Robert Grimes tweeted to the Imperial, Gemma Doherty plans to spread dangerous falsehoods about the HPV vaccine at your venue this Thursday. Her assertions are long debunked and put lives at risk. I've emailed you in the hope you'd reconsider allowing this event. Happy to chat. That was from David Robert Grimes, who we've spoken to many times on the show. We approached David with a view to talking to us on the opinion line today, and he was all set to do so. We've spoken many times. We consider him a friend of the show. Very scientifically qualified man and all of that. But when he heard that I'm going to be talking to one of the parents who will be going to the meeting and speaking at the meeting, he pulled out. And I'm disappointed at that. He pulled out because he felt we were giving it a platform and he didn't want it to be given. Well, David, that's not how the show works.